Toby, Sam, welcome to Bored to Death.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm so excited genuinely to have both of you here. It's been maybe like a year of trying to get it arranged, some of it on me. It's life.
It makes a difference to us operating individually and people thinking he's me and I'm him.
There is that.
So.
Guilty as charged. Maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, I remember the moment where I was like,
oh my God, guys, there's two of these guys?
I've just seen the two of them in the same place. But no, I'm so excited to hear this for you guys. There'll be separate stories. I'm sure some of the stories throughout this episode will intertwine. But who wants to start? How did you get your first skateboard?
So I think Toby got the first board, but I can wind it back a wee bit to our first experience. So when we were living west end of Glasgow, Kelvingrove was still in the park, but I don't remember the concrete park at all. But what I do remember is walking past what is now the skate park, which was a roller rink, and it had these big wooden ramps, a kind of terrible tarmac slope, a bit of flat, and these wooden ramps. And I just remember seeing people, this was maybe like early 80s, 83, 84.
I think before. I think
maybe before, just skating these ramps. And it was just something, it was there in the back of my head, when you're wee. But there was no real exposure to skateboards. It died off. So, but it was always there, that thought. And I still have a picture of that in my head. And then since that, I've found pictures of those wooden ramps, and they're pretty much exactly as I remember them. So, but that was kind of the pre-introduction, because skateboarding wasn't really popular. It was hardly anyone doing it, so you didn't see people skating down the street and think, "Oh, I fancy that, looks amazing." So, but I'll pass over to Toby.
That's my first memory exposure as well. Probably same. We'd have been out on a Saturday morning, going to Kelvingrove with our parents, and my memory is, and I've never been clear about whether it was looking at the original concrete park or looking down at the kind of rink area that was left when that was demolished. The thing is, I'm pretty sure when was the original park demolished? 85?
Something about that, yeah.
So a couple of years before we started skateboarding properly. But I have a distinct memory of looking down from the bridge over the Kelvin on the Kelvin Way and seeing people rolling about, and just that, it's such a cliche, but you're just like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Don't know what it is. It's different. Yeah. We're not, neither of us when we were little kids. I think this is probably around, kind of 1980, 81. So, you'd have been five or six. I'd have been sort of 7, something like that.
Really young.
Yeah, really but young. just like a thing when you're like, whoa, that's a different thing. And I mean, so much of what I'm an artist, and so much of the reason that I'm an artist is when it goes back to childhood of going, that's different. What's that? I want to go over there and see what that is. And then it probably kind of continued. It probably emerged then by maybe like 86. I'm going to say probably summer of 86, when skateboarding was kind of bubbling up
Coming up again, yeah.
As Radio talked about in the last episode, that we're same generation.
Back to the Future.
Back to the Future is a big deal.
Bones Brigade as well.
Yeah. But even pre-Bones Brigade, this is before seeing any skate videos, it's just starting to appear in the culture. And to the extent that me and a couple of friends from school, like one of my pals, his older sister, had one of those surf flyers that Jamie was talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, about 3/4 of an inch thick, with like folded metal trucks and steel wheels. Absolute death trap. And we would go into Botanic Gardens and try and go down the big hill, kind of skated down the hill. My first slam was in the middle of that hill.
I remember that.
And we're like, right, more. And then our late father, bless him, he came home one day. He was working in Edinburgh a lot of the time, and he'd seen in the window of a shop on Leith Walk a little fiberglass, not like a kind of polyprop thing, but it was actually made out of fiberglass, yellow fiberglass bendy board thing with like 2 little black kind of stylized cartoon footprints on it and big kind of super soft wheels. And he bought it for a tenner or something. came home with it. And there's a photo of him a couple of years later standing on it in his school uniform outside the front of our house at the time. It's the only documentation of it.
Just the minute you stood in it, thing just bent like that. You know,
yeah, it's like
mass production, not designed for.
And then when the tail got filed down, it was like total razor tail, absolutely deadly. But then, and that was always that thing of like, that's really kind that our parents recognised this, but this is actually a piece of shit. So then by the kind of summer of 87, it was.
So we're becoming teenagers at that point.
Yeah, so I would have been 13, he'd have been 11.
So what happened? It was the end of school. You know, it's the summer, and your folks are trying to, get you something to do to keep you out of the house or stop them going mad. So we went to. They took us in to see Mick at Quarterback on top floor of Virgin on Union Street, as it was. That's Mick that did NBC later on.
Mick O'Neill.
And Mick sent him away and said, "Look, go and buy cheap boards. Don't come and spend all this money on these setups. Go and buy cheap boards from somewhere else, and if they really like it, come back and see me."
Fair.
I mean, you don't. It's incredible, and that's Mick all over,
Good,
right?
good business. Because after that, my mum was always like, "He's a good guy."
Plaid wasn't open at that time, so that was the only place to get them. It was American football, but that kind of went by the wayside, and it was all skate stuff. So, so we went to Greaves, which is that still there?
Yeah.
Greaves
I was
is still there.
I was in there on Saturday looking at basketballs with Robin, who was my younger son, who's the same age as he was when he got his first proper skateboard.
Yeah. Oh. So we got these. I think they're Ripstick Boneheads or beach guys.
No, Boneheads.
Boneheads. I've never found them online. Horrible things, I got like a 9-inch. It was just it wasn't.
You got the kind of midi one.
It was a kind of tombstone shape. No nose on it. No concave at all. Almost convex. Wee bit of a tail. Loads of plastics. Something. It wasn't urethane. It wasn't quite rubber. I don't know what the wheels were, but they
pretty fluoro.
Yeah, rolled down a hill. Kind of fluoro. Fluoro pink, fluoro yellow, and yours was a kind of wider, slightly more traditional shape. But yeah, awful things. But did the job.
A little bit in the sort of skulls and bones and blood coming out the ear type thing.
Yeah. I suspect there's none in existence anymore, happily. But
and
then
landfill.
We had those for a week, and we were into it. We had a few friends that had boards because everyone kind of had a board. It was a thing to get. So just a wee crew from literally the local houses. And then a week later, we got mugged. Just introducing us properly to what became a fairly regular occurrence as dodging trouble.
Skateboarders.
Really mugged?
Yeah, just near the house. A couple of guys.
I was wearing glasses by that time, and I got the lens in my glasses broken.
Couple of heads on bikes.
And we had to go off down to a family gathering on my mum's side. Our mum's side, the family's English. We were down in the Lake District, kind of meeting them, confirming all the stereotypes about Glasgow as I turned up with a black eye. And I think I'd actually made a black card because we didn't have time to get my lens and my glasses fixed. I think I was feeling sorry for myself, and I'd made a black card lens that I was wearing in my glasses. So this is Glasgow.
Yeah.
So that was that. And then I think we went on holiday up north.
That buggered it for the summer.
And I think we were away for a couple of weeks up north, and we're like, I really liked that, really enjoyed that. So we came back, and folks replaced us with the same boards. So that was that from there on. I think, 87, we just kind of slightly moved away from the local area. Some of those kids kind of dropped off, other sports and families not approving, that kind of thing. And then the farther away we got from the house, the less the parents were pleased with what was happening with their child. It's I like you to be in a rugby pitch on a Saturday morning, and that's it. So a bit of that going on, but we were free and easy to do what we wanted. And we kind of met a bunch of folks from the West End still, but, from different schools and things. Pretty solid crew, actually, some rippers in there. And just kind of skating around Barrs Road and the university.
Proper, like, Glasgow.
Yeah.
Very Glasgow.
Yeah.
And it was, first proper pro boards was probably that. It was at Christmas, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Christmas 87. So these kind of crappy market boards only did about sort of 5 months service, I think. But when you're that age, it seems like forever. And as Sam says, by that point, we're, Quarterback was sort of on the rate. It was like, let's go back to Quarterback and see Mick. And when you're there, you start meeting kids from the south side, people from other parts of town. and you're quite, my older son skates a lot, Kit, and it's been amazing the last couple of years seeing that happen to him.
Yeah.
Where you just kind of echelon into a situation, and you meet kids from lots of different bits of the city, and it was basically game on after that.
Yeah.
And at that point, was there a real buzz around skateboarding again?
Yeah.
Like it was like the in thing
it
to
was
do
big
again.
I think, in
Glasgow, I mean, I'm sure it was stateside, but Glasgow, Scotland,
the street skating was happening. Everyone would kind of want to ride a ramp, but at the same time, there was lots of videos coming out of street skating, and the public domain came out. And we were like, hold on, we can go and do that down Bars Road. We can go and be Ray Barbie.
It was exciting as a child.
That
feeling. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Looking at that specific timeline, if you go from, like, we started in summer of '87, first skate video, I don't know about you, but first skate video I certainly saw was Animal Chin.
Yeah. We had to borrow a VHS player to watch it.
And then within, a year, public domain came out, and it was like the doors of perception are open, because there was always this sort of exclusivity. I mean, this is so much of, I guess, what Jamie talks about, where you're like, this is so amazing, and there's Christian Hosoi, 10 feet in the air, not terribly relatable to a wee skinny ginger guy in Glasgow. But you're like, I've got this energy and enthusiasm. What do you do? So all there is to do is go street skating. So this is something that's talked about a lot in, particularly around kind of RAD magazine and that sort of late 80s, really early 90s, before the Sunday trading laws changed. So on a Sunday, and it's totally, people of our generation romanticize it, but it has a basis in fact, in that you go into town on a Sunday and there would just be like 24 wee guys like firing up and down Sauchiehall Street, clatter, clatter, clatter. All the shops are shut. Nobody gives a shit. And that was a thing, and it was in that kind of crucible that you met people from literally all over Glasgow, meeting folk from Giffnock, meeting folk from Easterhouse, folk coming in from Cumbernauld and East Kilbride, occasionally mixing it with BMXers as well, and it felt like there was just a lot of like 13, 14, 15-year-old kids just going around in big mobs.
And this was in obviously pre-internet, pre-mobile phones, people having each other's phone numbers, and you would meet on a Sunday at there was an old war memorial in the middle of Central Station, and there was also a bank in Central Station, which is still there, but it's all mosaiced over and stuff. But you could skate that for a wee bit for anyone limbered up to kick you out. But then there was just stuff all over. There was some incredible banks behind Princess. What's it called?
The Bubble Banks. The Bubble Banks. Princess Square.
Behind Princess Square. I've never found a photo of them yet. It's my nemesis, that photo. But some incredible couple of jelly bean shaped banks with pipes sticking out and stuff. Cracking spot. And then St Enoch development opened up, and we were kind of having big wheels back then, so the monoblock didn't really matter. It's just all these different stair sets and
Bass Street,
Alderson, and so many great spots.
Bass Street Banks, Boots Step on Sauchiehall Street. So there were, I mean, I think back to the early 90s, and of course everything became so sort of block focused with Embarcadero becoming this sort of center of, because skateboarding was so small, it was able to have this single focal point, and everyone wanted blocks to skate. But Glasgow at that time was really terrible for blocks. But rolling back to the kind of late 80s, it was like there were, you could go and slappy a terrazzo step outside Boots all afternoon and you were stoked. That's all you really needed. You didn't.
It's simpler.
And in the background, Livy was there, of course, as the kind of thing that friends of parents would say, "Oh, I heard there's a skateboard park in Livingston." You're like, "Yeah, we know about it." I mean, the first time we went there, were you on that trip as well?
Yeah, when you rolled right down the middle.
Well, we arrived as a school friend of mine who sort of dipped out of skateboarding pretty early, but she kind of drove us through in her to the Honda Civic, and we arrived, and we were just like, just completely bewildered by this place. I had no clue about how a skate park works. Rolled in the end of the half pipe, made it through the half pipe, got taken out from a BMX coming down from where the wee bowl is. Like, burst my jeans, and when he was bleeding, then it started raining, and we got in the car and went home. And it was like, that's Livy.
That's classic Livy. Turn up and it rains.
Turn up and it rains. You've completely knackered yourself and embarrassed yourself. And that was like a sort of single hit, like, oh yeah, there's an etiquette to operating in skate parks. You can't just
do what you want at all times.
The same conversations happen today, more with the parents of those kids on skaters as opposed to the skaters.
But I learned pretty quickly.
I mean, the spot thing's really interesting. I remember watching like a new do video and seeing Ed Templeton nose bumping everything. Like, we need to find a nose bump spot. So you'd go out literally skating around, you're skating other bits and bobs, but trying to find a wall to nose bump, and I can't find a great wall. And it's amazing how new tricks came out and styles change. And like, I've never thought of skating. Didn't even know that trick existed, but now I need to find that thing to do it on. And
we were kind of lucky in that because we were lucky enough to live in the West End. We were close to university, and there were spots there up at the Adam Smith building up the top of the hill, which is basically unskateable now, but there were sort of engineering brick kind of drops, and you could put a bit of crappy plywood up against the steps. You had a little bank. There was a drop you could practice your melancholies off. And then in the wet weather spot down there was underneath the Boyd Orr building, the tower on University Avenue, that's been refurbed in recent years, and they've filled this space in, but it was basically a kind of loading access dock that went right underneath the building. It was known as the wind tunnel, that had curbs with little kind of drop curb cut things in it, so it was just like slappy heaven. And there were times when you go down there on like a sort of soggy day, and there'd be like 20 skaters under there going.
I can imagine.
It was rad. At the same time, thinking back, it was absolutely grim.
Really grim.
The wind piled through, the rain was coming in a bit, everyone was just a bit cold, but we wanted to go skiing, so changed days.
That's why I've got so much respect.
What about at that time? Do you still have friends from that time today?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, recently had Toby's 50th, I was going to say 40th. Had a wee get together session. But people are busy and can't make it. But you're in touch with everyone. There's still people.
That's incredible.
Knocking about
through skateboarding.
Through skating, Wow. There's West End people still knocking around. A lot of them don't skate anymore, but certainly from that kind of '89 period onwards, like the Glasgow crews, most of them are still skating. I think. In fact, everyone's still skating.
I mean, there's a slight shift there from us being like dipping into town at weekends and meeting people from all over the city, but during the week it was more people from other schools locally. So and you have people like Alex Lawrenson and Tom Bevan, who we used to skate with back then, who still skate. And I bump into occasionally. It's always really nice to see them. Some other people who are still around. So that was like really early doors. That was who we were skating with, like
that's 88.
Within the first year of us starting, and they're still kind of in the mix. But then really come sort of later on in 88, 89, the church opens, and that becomes a real nexus for, getting, and Clan opens as well, of course, although there was to a degree this sort of slight rivalry between Clan and Quarterback, or perceived rivalry in terms of who the crews were. So a lot of people from other parts of Glasgow were more affiliated with Quarterback because it was in the town centre. We were West End.
Oh, okay. I get. I'm there.
We went to Clan on the opening day. Well, he almost didn't make it for reasons he'll tell you in a second. So we were kind of wedged in with Clan from the start. Really, for the first few years, it was open. So it wasn't really that there were cliques, but there was a little bit of definition there. But then the church, like Angel Lights out at Temple, opened, and that kind of threw everyone in the same pot together in different ways. But
So how did you
Clan opening
was opening?
So Clan was interesting because we were in the West End, and when you're wee and there's barely any skate magazines, there's no videos. You're kind of just you're all learning together, and it was the thing we called a body hop. Craig Gosling used to do them. It's basically just an air on the ground. You reach down and grab your board. It's quite hard when you get old, but you would go off and do an acid drop. You do a wee body hop.
Early grab,
and we were all
basically
the whole summer doing those and different funny stinking grabs. And but what we didn't know was we knew Kelvingrove had been there, but that seems years ago when you're that wee. And we didn't know about the rich history of kind of Jamie, Davey, Chimp. Very like internationally known crew from Glasgow. That came through, and a lot of them ended up going to the States, and
Mark Hamilton, Chris Lonergan.
Yeah, so there was a really strong crew. We didn't really know that until we went down to Clan. I'm like, hold on a minute, these guys, like, they seemed ancient, because I think Jamie was 26 or something, Davey was 24. I'm like, oh, that's us kind of retiring and run a skate shop. So
but the first to you as a teenager,
I
think
I was 13 or something. So the first we knew about Clan was a flyer through the door. They flyered the entire West End. Still got one.
Wow.
Still got it, and it just said, "What is it?" And a skate shop opening up. So we skated down. I think they opened on the Friday, and came down with the kind of West End crew. There's about 6 or 7 of us, I think. Probably
skated down from our house.
Yeah, came down behind the Rock pub, which is still there. You can cut down across the road, and I got hit by a car. For real. So they'd all got across, and I was crossing, and I just. Out of nowhere, were you actually
skating? Because the thing is, I was a terrible big brother because I was a way off down the hill.
You're on the skateboard, I take it.
So I was actually running across it, holding my board under my arm, and it hit me here, and I went flying, landed rolling on my hip, rolling in my board. So all I had was a bit stiff and a bit of a graze, nothing. The front of this guy's car was had a good foot kind of stove in on the bonnet, where he'd caught the edge of my gons, my first proper board, which I still have.
Tales about that tiny. Long.
And the board took the impact, and I landed rolling, and that was that. So then the police came up, and this guy, I think Craig Gosling and there was a few others that come back and was like, this guy had clearly had a few beers.
Oh my God.
And he was like, but he was kind of quite shocked. And he was like, I've just been out for lunch. I'm just heading back to work. And the police came down, and they just sent the guy on his way, no problem at all. Massive skid marks, that kind of thing. The kind of thing now that he'd be straight in the back of the car. But
100%.
I was in the wrong, so I got taken home.
Somebody followed on down to me, I remember. I was like, skate shop's so exciting. Someone comes in, your wee brother's just been knocked down.
Yeah.
It's like
so
conflicting emotion.
So I got taken in, my mum was there, and the police came in. She gave him a bit of a bollocking because I said the guy was clearly drinking, he was going really fast. And the police were trying to give my mum a lecture about road safety, and she wasn't having it. So I think she ended up driving me down to Clan. So I got there eventually.
But you were okay.
I was okay. It was just one of those mad things. So
just the board saved.
But that was like the day of Clan opening. So I made it down, and you walk into the shop, and Quarterback was amazing because they had everything. You look at the magazines, the bits at the back of Transwell.
It's a big unit.
All these boards, and then you look up, and Mick had all the vision boards, every single one, and he played about 5 of them under the counter, and they had everything. But Clan was a bit more intimate, and it was a bit more curated because there's brands that they just didn't want to have because they didn't like them. And there was stuff they wanted to have.
But then they would have, it was when all the, like, Lucero started doing his own thing, so they would have all that stuff, and it was like, oh, this is really cool, like the absolute coolest stuff.
Yeah, like Todd Swank was over, he knew them, and he was over for a bit, so this guy does Foundation. Before he'd started Foundation, so he was there, and it was just like super cool, and they just had all the good stuff, and there was videos on, and this is on our doorstep. This can't be true. So that was great, and they were lovely. We were obviously customers, but it wasn't about that.
Unbelievably tolerant of wee pricks hanging around, not spending money. I mean, we ended up getting sort of Saturday jobs that we got paid a couple of quid for. But Jamie knew that we were basically nicking stickers, and he just turned a blind eye to it. And it was like, that was the wages, were a couple of quid.
But you were officially working in the store.
Yeah, we were officially working there.
I was 12 and you were 14. So we did get to the point of working, I think, a couple of quid an hour over Christmas. You were basically just setting boards up and talking to folk and badly screwing rails on.
Because there were points. I mean, there were points that, remember that lad Tony Montgomery? So he and I were same sort of age as a guy from Southside who I've not seen since probably about 1989, I think he broke his collarbone, and that was him done.
Yeah.
But it was at that time in, probably end of Christmas '88 or whatever, when it was just really mental. So it was crazy in quarterback. Like our old friend Gary Brown used to work in quarterback, and you would just have two people just assembling boards, full setup. And there were days when it was like that in Clan, and that we were basically like the setup monkeys. So got really good at gripping boards, got really good at getting, broken kingpins out of trucks and things. So it was really like the technical apprenticeship of like how you set a board up, and try and upsell people kind of tailbones and bits of plastic they don't need.
How long did you stay working at Clan?
I think it was a couple of years.
It was a couple of years, yeah.
So I think in
1988 to 90 and
89, Davey kind of split off. He went off to Brazil, and it didn't really come back, did he? Didn't come back to the shop, so so we were there helping out, and then things took a bit of a dip, and we had focus. I mean, we were working Saturdays, but when you're you want to be in town skating on a Saturday, so it kind of worked both ways. We weren't working there anymore, but great days. And I
finished school, and was starting to. I mean, still skating all the time, and still would pop into Clan, but it used to be that any day you didn't have homework, you'd just go down to Clan after school and watch videos and noise Jamie up.
Yeah, I know.
The man's a saint, honestly.
Absolutely. So I think with Clan, that first year we were working there, that 1988 was the Kelvin Hall. Kelvin Hall, I suppose they call it AES Open Championship, a couple of days of events in Kelvin Hall. With the vert ramp.
The vert ramp that then went on to do the vert ramp in the church.
I have seen footage of this on YouTube. Guys getting interviewed. And
Neil Blender was there.
Neil Blender,
So also Craig Johnson, like heavy Zorlak dudes.
Dave Crabb and a bunch of kind of Euro, Soren Abbey. And so some pretty heavy rippers, but we were more interested in the street course, obviously. So there was a street course that was probably the first, I would imagine, proper street course ever built in Scotland.
Pretty much, yeah.
Some decent stuff in it, still quite street styly, transition things, but some curbs and slappy things as well. And I think that night before we went down to help out, and we were there till quite late, trying to put a floor down because the surface was unskateable, so they ended up having to ply the floor. So, but that was a great event. I think they made an absolute loss on it, but really interesting to do. But all these US pros over it in the depths of a Glasgow winter, they're wondering what the hell's going on.
It's mental.
And then, so the term angel lights has been mentioned a couple of times now on the podcast in the last couple of episodes. We'll stay tuned for a bigger project on angel lights, but for anyone watching that wasn't in Glasgow at that time, and because it essentially doesn't exist anymore,
the building doesn't even exist anymore.
So
what was angel lights?
It was a not long empty church on Strathcona Drive in Anniesland, full of ramps. Best way to put it. So
how did these ramps get in?
So it was I'd say about half of the big vert ramp from the Kelvin Hall went in. So they had to dismantle it. So there's some photos online, so you can get a bit of an idea, and there's plenty of videos on YouTube. It's kind of got the main hall with a balcony and the naves, whatever, there's bits sticking out the side. It's kind of the shape of a cross. There's bits sticking out the side, and there's a wee back room. And the place was high enough to put a big vert ramp in, which is always the problem with the vert ramp, finding the height. So that was the main feature. So it was filled the space really well, but of more interest to us were all the other wee bits. So underneath the seating area, there was a 3 foot high, 12 foot wide mini, 16 foot wide, 12 foot, which was amazing. Quite mellow. Given at that
basically
point,
the first mini ramp we ever got to skate. There'd been an outdoor. I mean, to just roll back a little bit, there'd been an outdoor ramp in Anniesland that lasted, I think, about a month. There's an article in Skateboard magazine about the night that got burnt. Everyone got beaten up and the ramp got burned down. That's the ramp that we first dropped in on, which I think was probably 8 foot. Something
pretty scary,
kind of midi,
pretty
tight, big, and that was the ramp. You're like, this is where you're stepping into the void, little man. learned to drop in on that. But the guys that were behind that, there was a kind of West End crew that were sort of adjacent to Jamie and those guys. Some slightly odd kind of, some of it degenerated into, I don't want to say too much about it because I don't really know what the story was, but a little bit kind of culty business going on, slightly odd kind of vibe. Yeah. But there were some good people in there who got stuff done, and they'd somehow secured this church. After the Annie's Land ramp got burned down, the outdoor one, they then, in the church hall to the side, while they were fitting out the main church, they had an 8-foot midi.
Yeah.
That my memories will always be of our old friend Justin Mall, who's a really great transition skater. Seen Justin a bit recently, he still skates. It's just Justin doing 50-50s to fakie. That thing I think was about 16 foot wide, if I remember.
It's pretty big.
And he's just doing like mechanical 50-50s to fakie. How'd you do that? He's like a little bit older than me. I was like, he's really good. But you used to get to skate that if you did an hour helping out in the church. You got to skate the midi, and they eventually built the big thing with, as Sam says, the vert ramp with the really sweet little mini under the platform, but then other cool bits as well.
Yeah, I mean, to the side there was an incredible spine, a kind of 2-foot spine, but a much wider ramp with an extension and a roll-in. Again, it was about 3 feet.
Yeah.
And then the other side, the kind of immortalised by Neil Blender of all
and
people.
Matt Hensley.
And Hensley, of course, as well. There was a kind of another quarter pipe, but there was just a big whiplash wall ride, went right up the wall, and an incredibly steep, with big chunky coking thing that if you scratched the grind, you were happy. And then Neil Blender just turns up and does tricks on it like it's a...
It was probably like a 4-foot transition with 2 feet of vert or something.
Yeah. We're definitely going to have a bigger project later on in the season and really get into Angel Lights. But I think for me,
it's a fascinating thing because it was...
the reason I'm just completely fascinated by everything, from when I saw the first photo, we'll put the photo up just now, of everyone, I think on top of a ramp with a stained glass window in the background.
It was in I remember thinking, Sunday supplements.
What the fuck is that? But also then finding out it was in Scotland, then finding out it was in Glasgow. I just needed to know.
Yeah.
Obviously, it doesn't exist. I'm not going to get to go. I'm not going to get to go and skate. I just really wanted to know.
I mean, I don't even know how long it was. Like, it was probably only there for like a year and a half.
It was a victim of street skating, really. So after a while, we skated the ramps a bit, but there was a room through the back, and there was a couple of obstacles in it, and we spent a lot of time. I remember skating with Chris Mowat,
a slappy bar kind of thing,
legendary Glasgow street skater, who apparently still lives in Arran now. But it was just a room with some flat ground and a few bits in it, and we spent far more time than we should have in there, as opposed to out front skating the amazing ramps. But and I think it just kind of tailed off.
And I think kind of in terms of the crew that ran it, there was
problems.
There were some issues arose there. And probably, it's amazing speaking to John Bailey and everyone at the loading bay about the business dimension of what they're doing and how they sustain that, because it's a really crazy job keeping an indoor skate park alive and sort of solvent. Imagine. So these were not people who, they were idealistic and they did this amazing thing, but it was ultimately not sustainable.
Yeah.
But the key thing is that, for us lucky people at the age of, 15, it felt like it was there for a long time. It was only a blink of an eye now, but it was there at a really important time. And I always think about my old friend Robbie Hubbard, or Hubby as he was known, vert skater, massive fan of Jason Jesse at the time, now an incredible guitarist. And his first album that he put out, it came with a little booklet, and there's a song that's titled, I think, sort of Temple 1988 or something, or 1989, I can't remember. And he just talks about
temple, as in the church,
and because it used to get referred to as temple. Or the church.
That's cool.
And
that's cool.
He says some words to the effect of like, if I hope this was a really important place for me. I hope everybody has an equivalent in their life version at the age of like 15 or 16, when you're working out what you're doing. And we were lucky that we were on the right side. We could skate. It took us about 20 minutes to skate up there. It was
worth noting that hubby was about the only one of our generation that could actually skate vert properly, other than just rolling around. And
that's very true.
And then he also the first person I saw do a proper handrail skating down to get the bus home. Yeah. There was a handrail further down. He did it one day. Remember that red handrail?
I mean, he could do he lent into the vert skating basically because he was such a massive Jason Jesse fan that he was like, I need to learn to do like frontside stalefish. I was like, on that ramp, really? And sometimes you'd be skating the little mini underneath the vert ramp, and you'd hear this bang, and everything would shake, and it was because hubby, he was like solid dude. It's like hubby's just landed on the flat bottom, the whole building shook. But it's a lot of things like that.
But overall, when you think back to Angel Lights, you've had positive.
Absolutely. I mean, the final straw, I think, was it summer? It was a summer now, 89 or 90, must be 90. And they were struggling, so Swatch had given them some money. There's footage of this on YouTube to put a big jam on, and they were worried about, they thought there'd be loads of spectators and things, so they ripped out the spine ramp, and I think some of the Whiplash side went as well to put seats in, and that was just kind of the end. I think that was the last event. I think it didn't reopen. But ahead of this, I was thinking, do you remember that New Year we were there, and we couldn't get out, so we were skating. We were skating, and this is a running theme around about that time. Not saying that skaters have it easy now, but we used to get a lot of chases and a lot of threats of violence because that's just the way it worked.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So we were in, and there was somebody came through and said there's a crew outside or something. It was Scott Fleeto, who was a notorious gang who would just, they probably still exist, but they were a lot scarier then, and they would run and chase you, and you had to escape. But they were outside, so the big church stores got shut. There was no kind of responsible adult there. There was a wee girl who was probably not much older than us who was kind of looking after it. They lived nearby. No phone lines, so they were all outside, like kind of trying to get in, and we're like,
forgotten that.
So we just had to stay in there and kind of pretend everything was cool, just kind of skate and not be too worried. No food or drink, no way to contact the outside world back then.
It really was a different time, wasn't it?
So we just had to wait a few hours and then go, have they definitely gone? Let's get the hell out the back door and leave.
Wow.
But yeah, it was
mad.
Different
really
times.
Mad, but
character building.
Important, really. Definitely character
and as
building.
we go into now the 90s, you guys are, I take it, we've said leaving school, going on to either further higher education or jobs. How's skating fitting into your lives at this point?
I mean, I was still at school. You were studying. You came through to do work in Leith.
I went. Foundation. Yeah, I did a foundation course. I left school in basically end of fifth year, and went and did a foundation course at a little art school called Leith School of Art in Edinburgh. Well, in Leith. And so I was traveling back and forth doing that and reading, all the skate magazines and Enemy and Melody Maker. Like so I buy a stack of magazines for a fortnight and just work my way through them on the train back and forth every day. So still living at home, but commuting through, and basically any spare moment was skateboarding, but also being in Edinburgh, and quite often I would get off at Waverley, and if it was dry I'd just skate all the way down Leith Walk. And on one of those occasions was the first time I ever met Joe Ward on North Junction Street. Just bumped into him and he was wearing like an H Street top, and I was like, all right. So yeah, that was me. I was starting to head on the kind of in the art direction. You were still at school.
I mean, we were still at that point. Skating was very small, and we weren't really hanging in Clan. I think because there was no one else around in Clan. But in Quarterback, which we moved to Sauchiehall Street by that point, there was people. So there was a pretty solid crew, consistent crew. Shug was there, Colin Kennedy, Gary Browner worked there.
Yeah,
a couple others. Pete Kelly. Fairly solid, consistent crew. And we'd meet there and go and skate if it was dry, or go and skate the odd undercover spot that was there.
That was really the point in time where a lot of, talking about crews, it wasn't like they were crews that were in opposition at all. It was just, you were aware that there was a bunch of folk from that part of town, and you kind of knew them, but you didn't really hang out.
Yeah.
And that was a point at which I guess a lot of people dropped out post the church closing. It was like a kind of, a pivotal point in the way that skateboarding was going. And it meant that those that were left all coalesced around Quarterback, really in its kind of new guys on Sauchiehall Street, just below the art school basically. And we'd known Colin and a bunch of guys from sort of Giffnock and environs from the church, but that was really the point that we really started hanging out with Colin and, as Sam says, sort of Gary Brown and all those guys. And
it's always worth mentioning, we used to skate Kirkcaldy's multi-story car park quite a bit, which on the top floor was one of my all-time favourite Glasgow spots. There was like something out of the States, a couple of double-sided, really thickly painted yellow carbs. Incredible things.
Thermoplastic paint.
Yeah. There's an ancient episode of Taggart, and they're in it. You can just see
I've got stills from it.
We
were wearing
we'll put them up.
I'll try and dig them out. But I was watching an episode of Taggart a few years ago.
Couldn't get more Scottish, could it?
So again, on a Sunday, time was busy up, but Sunday the car park was still really quiet. So the second top floor, there was like a manual pad and a wee curb and just flat ground. I never got kicked out, so I spent far too much time there. And interesting, Edinburgh is an exactly parallel spot, like the multi, which still gets skated. So grim. It's not for people our age. But
back to the kind of notion of the wind tunnel at Glasgow University. I've got a lot of respect for Shuggy for being an almost 50-year-old man still going out and skating.
Yeah, he's
a machine.
Skating, big up Shug, keeping it realer than real.
I call him the Madonna of skateboarding. Because there's no one else that's done the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 10s, and now the 20s, and is still quite relevant at doing it. He really is the Madge of skateboarding.
He's something else. That guy, love him. Those are definitely the car park days. Yeah. And as Sam says, like Cowcaddon's sort of Cambridge Street car park, it had that on the top floor, but then they got taken out. Really annoyingly.
91-ish.
But then there was a lower level where the doors came out on each level, and you basically had a manual pad coming out at right angles. So it was like an end on. It was a manual pad. It was also had a curb on the end, which was great when like nose blunt slides and things were coming out. You're like, this is where to learn this stuff.
Because skating is changing as well in the 90s, big time.
Yeah.
It's doing that thing of shifting from vert to street.
At that point, Cowcaddon's was suitable because we were all going quite slow, trying to do underflips and things. It was just like, we didn't need much space.
Yeah,
we just needed a lot of time to land this one trick ever, which was disgusting, never to be repeated.
But then
I've done a kickflip, underflip once.
Yeah, but that was, I feel like that was a little bit, I think there was a really sweet spot like 1991 when there was still, I was thinking of it as like the kind of Vans Chukka era, when nollies were coming in. I remember like working really hard on like nollie nose wheelies. That was my thing for a while on these manuals, and it's actually the first place I skated properly one-to-one with Ray Dower was there.
Yeah, rings a bell.
And remember Ray doing like switch manuals, and there was a bit of that going on. So this was a little bit before it got like pressure flippy, late, like in kind of 92. But also things like, you can find a bin up there, put it on its side, and you can do like a bin. So that's what Glasgow really was at that time. It was pretty grimy. Is this even really a spot? Yeah. It's like, where's just about dry? Where's going to get us through? Yeah.
That thing of like, trying to find the right spots to do the right tricks. At the same time, we were neglecting certain spots. I mean, I didn't skate Kinning Park for years, and a great spot Kinning Park is. It's getting the love it's deserved over the last decade, but we just didn't go there because it wasn't kind of on trend.
But even Bass Street, I mean, remember like Bass Street, you'd skate and you'd roll around on it, but then you'd go on somewhere else. And it was only when Sean Sheffy was in town in 92, I think that would have been. I was at art school by that point, so I'd quite often come down in my lunch hour lunch break from art school, just come down the hill and like hang out at the skate shop. And there was a time like Sheffy came through town and we went out street skating with him, and he never forget, like, skated down Bath Street and ollied the hip at Bath Street without looking at it first.
So it's pretty steep landing. You've got to get wits about you.
And then after that, it's like, oh yeah, you can ollie that hip. And we all learned to ollie the hip. But it's just that classic thing of somebody who's unbelievably rad and with different eyes going, oh yeah, like I can just going to do that.
Pictures the level
no
of
one's ever done that
the popularity
before.
Of
like,
skateboard. Like at that point, like skating was so quiet that the Life video had just come out, kind of round about that age year, and Sean Sheffy's part's incredible. If you've not seen it going, he kind of redefined street skating by going quite big. And this guy just turns up. He's on some kind of tour, but he's on his own. Goes to the pub, has 2 or 3 pints of Guinness next door, and then goes
out clubbing with the Cosyth guys.
Yeah, let's go. Just that kind of on his own. And now, I mean, Sean, he's still ripping, but he's like 52 or something. But he was huge for a long girl and stuff. But
standing in the back shop, still doing like 2 foot high ollie, late shove it.
Yeah.
And we were like, what was that?
Yeah.
One of those instances when skateboarding, you're like, I don't understand what just happened.
We've never seen that trick in a video, and it just happens in front of you. Like, what's
going
on?
And then probably later on that year, Plan B video comes out, and it's like, oh, that's what all that is. So I mean, a lot of people came through. You know, H Street team came through. Like,
Santa Cruz was here. There was lots. There's an interesting aside for the first Plan B video question, which kind of just reset everything, just as you thought you were catching up on some tricks, and you're like, oh God Almighty, Pat Duffy backlipping handrails in the rain and things, just different scale. But there's the guy who filmed it's called Dave Sloshback, Californian guy, but he was going out and I think is now married to a girl from Glasgow. So he was over. So we were all in.
She worked in a clothes shop on Queen Street, next to where Fat Buddha is these days.
So he came in and said, I've got this video. So he showed us the original cut of the Plan B video before it had been released. So we sat in Quarterback on a wet Saturday, and he just pulled out this VHS and we watched it, and we're like,
months before it came out, and even in the States,
different edit with Gon's tricks.
Gon's tricks at the Power Warehouse, and it was just that in terms of kind of revelatory video experiences in the old school style, which is standing in a skate shop looking at a telly in the corner, public domain in Clan, and then seeing that rough edit of Questionable that I think bits of it didn't even have any music on it.
It was nowhere near finished.
We were just completely shell shocked by it, and that was really the point that the transition, pardon the pun, from vert being the dominant form to street being the dominant form, because in that video you've got Mike Carroll. Everyone was like, Mike Carroll, Rick Howard, absolutely, but Mike Carroll at Embarcadero, that's the absolute bleeding edge of where skateboarding is. And in that sense, that's where the next phase for us comes in with, I'd probably been to Bristol Square for the first time in about 1990, I think we went through. But then at that point, it was like, Bristol Square that's the spot. And then for the next couple of years, despite being in Glasgow and still skating car parks and things, every chance you got, you go to Edinburgh and skate Bristol.
You got a driving license in 1990, so
91, end of 91, I think.
And then Colin got one the year later.
Yeah.
Blue
So we started to be a bit more mobile.
Yeah. So it would just be weekends, we'd just get in the car and I'd go to Edinburgh. But I mean, Dundee factored in as well. We knew some of the crew because we'd been up to the original factory a few times.
The factory.
The first factory.
The first one, where the really famous contest was in 1990, I think.
Yeah. Jamie drove a van up, actually. We were all took a crew from Glasgow up, so that was incredible. There was some serious...
famous one of Lee Ralph carving the flat bottom. I don't know if you've heard that story, where he dropped... So Lee Ralph, like legendary New Zealand sort of wild man skater, skated for Vision. think he was wearing docks, wasn't he?
He was wearing docks, yeah.
Dropped in on this.
Whoa.
It was probably 5 foot?
5 foot, yeah. Big old spine ramp.
Dropped in, didn't touch the transition, carved the flat bottom, came back up the same wall and did a frontside grind, I think.
Yeah, just...
Another of those things where you're like, it's not actually possible to do that.
Yeah.
That was such a great day. But then London dudes were up, Simon Evans and Curtis McCann and
Mike Manzuri was there.
Mike Manzuri was there. Yeah, it was really like an amazing event. And then that factory came to an end, and then what is now Dundee Contemporary Arts on the Perth Road, there was this kind of warehouse down the railway warehouse that got taken over, and Ray and Jamie talked about it last time, and we would, we'd factor that in on our kind of weekend missions, flogging the hell out of my poor mother's Renault 5, driving all over central Scotland, giving it back to her on a Monday morning, like stinking of like 5 rank.
When it was really cheap to put petrol in the car and there was no entry fee for the skate park, and that second factory in Dundee, I mean the top floor, I mean we'd put done stuff in warehouses because there was empty warehouses, so you'd build some stuff, but generally it got demolished. But they were on a different scale up there. They were doing it properly. They built some serious ramps, incredible days.
The crew were organised.
The top floor was just like a playground of amazing street stuff. The bottom floor had a huge spine ramp in it, and then there was a lower level, a lower ceiling, so there was just some smaller stuff, and it was just open. It was just free, and it was incredible.
Climbing a window. So I mean, there was a while Gary Brown, this is probably 93, Gary Brown, who's from Cardress down Helensburgh way, and he'd scoped out an empty warehouse in Clydebank, just near the station, the Singer station, and that actually lasted for quite a long time. Yeah. It still had power, so you could wind up a big door and actually drive in, park the cars inside, so nobody would know you were there. And Gary and like some of the Clydebank guys built a bunch of stuff in there, and that was pretty good. But in Glasgow, we never had a kind of DIY warehousey spot like they had in
We're going
Dundee.
back the way we were, but it's noted that, I mean, for the young folks these days, the indoor parks are amazing, but that stuff just doesn't happen anymore because they don't exist, and if it did, the health and safety would not let it happen.
True.
But Toby and I put on with some wood from the church, I think it was about 1990.
Yeah,
and Neil actually sent me the clipping. Jamie helped us get into the church after it shut to get some wood out and some screws and things. And with some power tools from my dad, we built like a fun box and some bits and bobs. Had a jam at Kelvingrove. First prize was a pink Klaus Grab Mini that Mick gave us because he couldn't sell it. And we had a jam, and that was fun. And then the ramps went into a warehouse on St Vincent Crescent, down at Finiston. It was just an empty old warehouse that was just open.
It's now like a Bellway housing scheme.
Expensive real estate these days, but it was just this dead empty warehouse. Sat in front of these amazing, lovely old buildings. So we put it all in there, and it lasted a good few months that summer.
It did, yeah.
And you could just walk in off the street, and
then it got burnt.
That's standard.
Standard.
So things are great now. You can go to the loading bay and you can pay money, and you can have a great snack and a good coffee and a nice warm-ish skate. But those days were character building. You built stuff.
But equally, nowadays, I enjoyed your episode with the Kingston guys, and
amazing guys.
The notion, like, it never crossed anybody's mind that you could build something in concrete. That was a possibility. It was just like, that's not viable. I remember, even in the mid-90s being in SF and seeing that somebody had concreted up the bottom of a Jersey barrier, and I was like, whoa, that's enterprising. Never mind, the Arches or Kingston or
there was a ready supply of wood everywhere. There was just wood lying around, and it wasn't ours for the taking, but at the same time, it didn't seem to be anyone else's. So you would just find wood and put it up the stairs. And the same for Bristol for years is, you would just go on a wee wander on a Saturday and come back with a few sheets of ply and some stuff. And there you go, we're off for the day.
Which, of course, to go back to Kelvingrove, that's how post the demolition of the original concrete park, was left of that kind of tarmac
yeah,
lozenge that throughout the 90s, and even in the late 80s, I mean, I remember seeing, there was also a sort of generation kind of between us and Jamie and those guys that included people like Malcolm Hay. Malcolm Hay was an amazing street skater who he's a very low-key guy, but he was one of the first people that I saw that was like, that's street skating.
Yeah.
So I remember being down there and seeing Malcolm and Ginge and all those guys.
Jump ramps way up there.
Nicking a bench and putting a bit of ply up to jumping over it. And so that was very much what the DIY moves were. And that went on until KG got built 20 years ago. That was what would go on down there. You're like, oh, there's a really good, somebody's found a great big section of I-beam that's really good down at Kelvingrove. Glasgow, a lot of Glasgow was kind of cobbling it together and trying to find spots that you could skate when the weather was bad.
So we digressed there and we moved, but moving back to Dundee, I mean, these guys supercharged that with these ramps. I mean, incredible. Never quite worked to do that, like a really mellow but amazing transitioned hip. And it was just the perfect thing to do flip tricks over. So that was a feature for a couple of years. And I think that a rollerblader managed to electrocute themselves because it turns out the power was still live. So didn't kill himself, but he damaged himself. And I think the powers that be took note, and that was the beginning of the end. So we used to do
I shouldn't laugh.
No. Well, there's no footage, unfortunately. But there was a road trip that was, you leave Glasgow, get to Dundee, across the bridge. There's now a great concrete park that Youngo built, Newport on Tay, which is a cracking fun park. But there was a wooden bowl, an outdoor wooden bowl. It was only 4 foot deep.
It was so fun, that thing.
Incredible thing. And it somehow lasted for a couple of years in the elements next to Tay.
Is it Rick that built that?
I'm not sure, but I should ask
Rick Curran.
It might be.
I don't know. It was really fun. So we'd do that, and then we'd drive down to Edinburgh, sort of end up later in the afternoon at Bristol, skate Bristol for a couple of hours, and then if there was enough juice left, stop at Livy. So it was this full kind of
mini tour,
like racking up the mileage on the Renault 5. Honestly, our mother is a saint.
That was the thing for quite a while. We did that very regularly.
There was probably a couple of summers that was like the regular like one day a weekend you'd do that route. But then, things were intense at that point. Skateboarding was really small. There was sometimes there were, there was a little bit of a vibe around it. It felt quite tense at points.
Yeah.
Particularly at Bristol, because it was this kind of, like I say, a kind of a crucible, and there were quite a lot of big personalities there, and people would fall out with each other, and it was like a little Scottish version of EMB, basically. And it was amazing. It was and you had people like Wayne Fenlon documenting it, and various photographers came through, and it sort of popped up now and again in magazines. But for me, I was really glad later on in 1993. I was sort of into third year art school by that time, and I did an exchange to Chicago, to the Art Institute in Chicago, which was like a life-changing thing.
Can imagine,
just a whole other thing not to be talked about here particularly, but I was there and I was like, basically all I want to do is skate and then go exploring, and it really had a big impact on me personally and as an artist. But in terms of skateboarding, it was just unbelievable, and I met amazing people there, and some of the best spots in the world, street spots in the world, are there. I come back Christmas '93, and this one's fucked off to live in Edinburgh.
Way.
He's never come back.
Still there.
And I'm born.
Yeah.
And you're born. Bloody hell, I'm outnumbered. But the thing that was cool was, Sam had, I guess, been introduced. You can talk about this, but being introduced to the scene, and then made the decision that was the place.
I think people were people were leaving Glasgow, and Glasgow was starting to going to see gigs and things from the 90s back then. You could, but there was a lot of people getting stabbed in the city centre on Saturday nights and stuff. And I was like,
we really haven't painted the best picture of Glasgow in this episode, but
it was gnarly back then.
It was gnarly, and it's that point we're like, well, I can go to college in Edinburgh, and I know everyone at Bristol, and I can just go and if I don't like anyone at college, I've got Bristol and all my mates there. So it seemed like the right thing to do, and I never regret it. And I think from there, just Bristol. Imagine having a spot where you can go. If it's a dry day, you can go any time, and you can go and skate with them, and you'll know people, and there's always something fun happening on a Saturday. Just kind of spoilt, really. A lot of people give up because there's nowhere to skate, there's nobody to skate with, and they can't enjoy themselves. So we were very lucky with that. And again, I do feel sorry for the youth in some ways that, yes, the skate park's there, and it's great, but it's a bit one-dimensional.
Yeah, I get that.
It doesn't really throw too much challenge in your face.
Yeah.
We had character building stuff, looking back at some of the sketchy stuff, but you remember it and you learn from it. And
it's a very serious point about what skateboarding offers you as a young person. Is it is its own thing, and it's a culture, and it brings with it aesthetics and music, and you can build an identity around it, but it also connects you to the rest of the world in a really interesting way. You meet people who are different from yourself. It puts you in challenging situations. When I went to study in Chicago, I was like, yeah, great. It was great to go to art school somewhere else, but I'm basically going there for the music and the skateboarding.
Yeah,
that's and without skateboarding, I probably wouldn't have gone and done that.
Yeah.
Or if I had, I'd have had a very different experience. And I was always very proud of Sam, going, yeah, I'm gonna escape this daft family and go and make a new life for myself in the utopia that is
nothing wrong
Bristol
with the family
Square.
at all. But yeah, it was just one of those moves.
Well, unfortunately, we've had so much fun. We've ran out of time, guys.
Sorry.
No, not at all. Not at all. This has been a wild ride, and we're only at 1993. I can't let you go, even though you are going to come back, and we're going to maybe not even wrap it up. We'll just call it Volume 2 for now. I can't leave or have you guys leave without giving me your song of the day. So maybe think about what we spoke about in this episode and pick a song from that time that we can get added to the playlist.
Oh my goodness.
So there's probably 92 onwards. It's probably my favourite band of all time, Guided by Voices.
Okay.
And they were, again, pre-internet days, so it was hearing it in the John Peel show, taping it, and then trying to track down a record, which was quite hard back then. And around about that time, 93, I think there's a song called Big School. It's not a very well-known song of theirs, but it's one
Those
of their
are the better ones on the playlist.
So it's kind of punchy. It's a song that somebody should have used in a skate video part, and as far as I'm aware, it's never been used. But yeah, Guided by Voices, Big School.
Okay, I'm gonna go further back. I think I'm gonna go back to 88 and Clan opening and being complete. I've just read Thurston Moore's autobiography and being completely obsessed with Sonic Youth and a song called Teenage Riot off the Daydream Nation album that was what I was listening to a lot right around the time that kind of Clan started up. So yeah, Teenage Riot by Sonic Youth. I did actually listen to it last week because I'd read Thurston's book.
Flashback.
Yeah. Flashback to my sort of 15-year-old self.
But thank you guys so much for finally coming on. It's been
Pleasure.
A treat just to hear everything, and a couple of weeks we'll be back for, we're not going to say conclusion because I think there's even more than that, but we'll just say a Volume 2.
Yeah. We've not even got to John Rattray yet.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you guys so much.
Nice one.
Pleasure, no, thank you.
No, really good fun.
I'm not an actress. I'm a